Judaism has been very often misunderstood, misrepresented, based on one of the commandments in the Torah that we read about in this week's Torah portion, an eye for an eye. Is the Torah about vengeance? A tooth for a tooth, a wound for a wound. And many have understood this to mean, literally, that when a person injures another person, whatever he did to the other shall be done to him. But the truth of the matter is that this was never the understanding of the rabbis, the sages, and the Jewish people. Throughout their long history, we have records of the judicial system going back to biblical times. There is no evidence whatsoever that any Jewish court ever poked out an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth and so on. Yet, when it comes to a life for a life, capital punishment, yes, the Torah did recognize that there is times when capital punishment for murder is appropriate, although it was very rare, because in order to get the death penalty in Judaism, you really have to be intent on committing a crime and not getting away with it, because you have to do it in the presence of two witnesses. The witnesses have to be qualified witnesses. They have to give you a warning, and the warning has to be a proper warning, has to be worded properly, and then within a few seconds you commit the crime, then you get the death penalty. But if you waited, then it wouldn't happen. There would be no death penalty. But there is a death penalty, at least on the books, and every now and then it probably was carried out, but never an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What is the reason for that? So the Talmud explains, which is the record of the oral tradition, that an eye for an eye actually means the value of an eye for an eye, or a similar commandment in the Torah where it says when a person inflicts a blemish, a wound to another, so shall be done to him. So this was never taken literally. It always meant you pay the value of the eye. How would you determine the value of the eye is a separate subject, just the same way, similar, not identical to the way an insurance company would determine the loss, the value of the loss of an eye. Let's say you're a brain surgeon and you can't perform surgery anymore because you only have one eye. That would be the way to determine the loss, the financial loss. But whatever the method of determining that, it's clear that the Torah did not mean literally an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It meant the value of an eye, the value of the tooth, which then, of course, raises the question, why couldn't the Torah just say that? The Torah is not embarrassed to tell us the truth. Why would it not want to tell us that if you injure someone, you must pay the damages? The Torah talks about paying damages in many places. Why not say the same thing over here? Why add an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? So the truth is that the Rambam, Maimonides, actually anticipates this question. And this is what he says. He says, when the Torah says, when a person inflicts a blemish, a wound, on another person, so shall be done to him, it doesn't mean that we injure this person as he injured his friend, but it means that he is worthy of losing his limb or to be injured as he did to the other. And that's why he pays for the damage. And that's what the Torah means when it says, do not take ransom for the life of the murderer. To the murderer alone, exclusively, you can't ransom, you can't just pay instead of getting the death penalty. But if you cause someone to lose their limb or to be injured, there is a ransoming. What exactly does this mean? Rabbi Zevin, one of the great Talmudic scholars of the 20th century, the editor of the Encyclopedia Talmudis, in one of his articles, he explains that what the Torah is trying to do over here is to teach us a lesson. The Torah is trying to say, when you cause someone a loss of a limb or an injury, and if the Torah would just tell you, pay for it, you would quantify the injury and say, well, the injury, loss of an eye, is worth $100,000. No, the loss of an eye is priceless. You can't put a value on it. Any normal person would be asked, you know what, for what amount of money would you be willing for us to take out your eye? Yeah, we'll do it with anesthesia. It won't hurt. And you'll be able to see with the other eye. Would you do it for $100,000? Would you do it for $1 million? No normal person would do it for any amount of money in the world. So the Torah wants us to know that when you're being told that for your injury that you caused, you pay for it, you might think that you're paying for the loss of the limb. And the Torah says, no, you're not paying for the loss of that person's limb because you cannot pay for it. Number one, it's priceless. Number two, the person doesn't own his limbs. And this is a very revolutionary concept that modern society doesn't seem to get. But as Maimonides writes explicitly elsewhere, that our body does not belong to us. If a person was murdered, for example, the Rambam says, person was murdered, but he didn't die right away, and he says to the courts, please don't prosecute the person who inflicted the wound that will cause my death. I forgive him totally. Please don't prosecute. It doesn't work. Why? So the Rambam says, because your body is not your own. It belongs to God. God gave us a body with which to do things. We have certain limits what we're allowed to do with our bodies, but it doesn't belong to us. So we're not paying. You can't pay someone for a limb that doesn't belong to him or her. What you are paying for is your own limb. You have to imagine, and this is the lesson over here, what is the purpose of punishment? There are many theories about what punishment is. So the Torah tells us one of the objectives of punishment, perhaps the most important objective, is to change your evil, to transform yourself. Well, how could you transform yourself if you're the type of person who would take out someone else's eye? So the Torah says, you deserve to have your eye taken out. Imagine if you would be in the position where your own eye is being taken out. You would then feel, you would be able to empathize with the victim of your crime. If you just had to pay money, you wouldn't empathize. You would put a value to it. But now that you're told you're paying for your own eye, for your own tooth, for your own limb, the Torah is, God in His infinite mercy allows you to ransom your own limb. You realize, you know what? I now understand what it means to lose a limb because it was supposed to be done to me. And only for God's great kindness am I allowed to pay for it rather than actually losing that limb. So here the Torah teaches us not just the law that you pay for the value of it, the way any judicial system would require of you. The Torah is telling us how to change. The way to change is to recognize how it would what would happen if it was done to you, to be introspective about it, and then realize that it's God's kindness that allows you to pay, but you're paying for your own limb, not for the other person's limb.